There was a version of you that never got to grow up. Not because you died, because that version, for the one who existed before the world told you who to be, was slowly erased piece by piece, and you didn't even notice it happening. For most of human history, childhood barely existed. Not the way we think of it now. Not as a protected, magical stretch of years where you're allowed to be small and unfinished. For thousands of years, a child was just a smaller, weaker adult. The moment you could carry water, you carried water. The moment you could hold a blade, you held a blade. There was no in-between, there was no soft landing into selfhood. You were either too young to matter or old enough to work, and the space between those two states was almost nothing. Picture it, a 7-year-old in medieval Europe standing in a field before sunrise, hands already calloused, already trained to expect exhaustion as a permanent condition of existence. No concept of just being a kid. No concept of play as something sacred. Play was a luxury for those who could afford to waste time, and almost nobody could. Childhood, as an idea, as something worth protecting, hadn't been invented yet, and that single fact should unsettle you more than it does. Because here's the part almost nobody talks about. The way a society treats its children is a mirror. It doesn't just reflect what that culture values, it reflects what that culture is willing to sacrifice. In ancient Rome, a father held the literal power of life and death over his newborn. The moment a child was born, it was placed on the ground in front of him. If he picked it up, it lived. If he turned away, it didn't. Let that sit with you for a second. An entire human life, reduced to a gesture. Not a decision made in rage, a decision made in silence, in the first few minutes of existence, by a man who hadn't even learned the child's face yet. And you'd think that's the darkest part. It isn't. Because in many ancient cultures, children weren't raised to become individuals. They were raised to become useful. Obedience wasn't a value. It was survival currency. A child who questioned, who resisted, who showed too much of their own will, that child was a liability in a world with no safety net. So cultures optimized for compliance. They engineered small humans into instruments of continuation. Not people, extensions. This is where something strange starts to happen, though, because if you trace this pattern far enough back, you start to realize something deeply uncomfortable. The very idea of childhood innocence that we treat as universal, as biological, as just natural, is actually a modern invention, a luxury item, something manufactured by wealth, safety, and time. For most of human history, innocence wasn't protected. It was simply unaffordable. Now here's where it gets stranger, because even in eras where survival wasn't the daily threat it once was, something else replaced it, something quieter, something that didn't leave scars you could see. In the 1800s, during the Industrial Revolution, children as young as 5 worked 16-hour shifts in factories. Not occasionally, routinely. Their small hands were valuable specifically because they were small, perfect for reaching inside dangerous machinery adults couldn't fit into. Read that again. Their vulnerability wasn't a weakness society protected, it was a feature society exploited, and this is where the psychological horror really begins, because those children didn't necessarily see themselves as victims. Many of them saw their labor as identity, as purpose, as the only version of value they had ever been taught to understand. When your entire sense of self is built around usefulness from the moment you're conscious, you don't grow up believing you deserve rest. You grow up believing rest is something you have to earn. A belief, disturbingly, that still lives inside millions of adults today. But then something strange happened. As societies grew wealthier, safer, more structured, childhood didn't just get protected. It got redefined, reinvented. It became sacred, almost mythologized. Suddenly, childhood wasn't a burden to survive. It was a garden to cultivate. Parents shifted from asking, "Will this child survive?" to asking, "Will this child succeed?" And that shift, that single reframing, created an entirely new kind of psychological pressure. One that didn't come from starvation or death. One that came from expectation. This is where everything changed. Because once survival stopped being the threat, achievement became the new god. Grades, talent, potential. The modern child wasn't handed a scythe or a hammer. They were handed a checklist. Be exceptional. Be well-rounded. Be ahead. Somewhere in the last century, we didn't eliminate the burden placed on children. We just made it invisible. We stopped demanding physical labor and started demanding emotional performance instead. The performance of being fine, being gifted, being enough. And that's not liberation. That's evolution of the same mechanism, wearing a gentler mask. Think about that for a second. A child in 1200 was taught, your body has value because of what it can produce. A child in 2024 is taught, your identity has value because of what you can achieve. Different century, same underlying message. You are not inherently enough. You must earn your right to exist comfortably in this world. But that wasn't even the most disturbing part, because here's what almost nobody wants to admit. Modern childhood, despite being safer, more comfortable, more monitored than any era before it, has produced some of the most anxious, most exhausted, most quietly disillusioned young people in recorded history. We removed the physical danger. We didn't remove the fear. We just relocated it. From the body to the mind, a child hunting for food 2,000 years ago feared wolves, hunger, disease. A child today fears failure, rejection, falling behind, being perceived as not enough. Dangers with no physical shape, no clear edges, no way to ever fully defeat them. You can outrun a wolf. You cannot outrun the feeling that you're not doing enough with your life. That fear doesn't chase you for a season. It follows you for decades. And this is the part that should genuinely disturb you. Every generation believes it has finally fixed childhood. Every era looks back at the one before it and says, we know better now. We're gentler now. We're wiser now. But the truth is, we haven't eliminated the machine that shapes children into whatever a society currently needs. We've just changed what the machine produces. Once it needed farmers, so it built farmers. Then it needed factory hands, so it built factory hands. Now it needs a specific kind of adult, productive, agreeable, endlessly self-optimizing, quietly anxious, perpetually striving. So that's exactly what it's building. Childhood was never really about protecting the individual child. It has always, in every era, been about producing the kind of adult the world currently requires. This isn't really about history anymore. You already know that. It's about you. Because somewhere inside you is still that child who was shaped, not by cruelty necessarily, but by circumstance. Molded by an era's version of what a person is supposed to become. You didn't choose your beliefs about worth, about rest, about achievement, about love as something conditional on performance. Those beliefs were installed, quietly, consistently, before you were even old enough to question them. And the truly haunting question isn't what was growing up like throughout history. The haunting question is this: if every civilization has unconsciously engineered its children into whatever it needed them to be, then what exactly were you engineered to become? And how much of what you call yourself is actually just the residue of an era doing what every era has always done, turning small humans into whatever kind of adult the world required next? You were never just raised. You were built, quietly, invisibly, generation after generation, century after century. And the machine is still running right now, shaping someone else's childhood into someone else's inherited fear. The only difference this time is that you're old enough, finally, to look back and ask who built you, and whether it's too late to build yourself again.